Well, welcome to season 6 of episode 2 of In the Growth Space. I'm your host, David McGlennon, and I'm really glad that you're here today. You know, this podcast is all about exploring and examining growth from a number of different perspectives. And I believe that life is all about learning and expanding and exploring new experiences. So that's why I have conversations with people who are on that journey of growth. And many of them are just like you and me. And they may be further along the road or have learned something that I find new and interesting that I just want to share with you. And they may be business leaders or they may be in some other arena of growth. But in every episode, I attempt to bring ideas on what it takes to grow and ways to grow, either through my story or through the stories of others who have grown. So if you're a new listener, I just want to say welcome. Thank you for joining the community. I know that we've been getting some new folks listening, and I'm really very grateful that our message of growth is reaching more leaders. You know, hearing other leaders' stories can help us when we need the encouragement the most. And so often when we hear what others have struggled with or what they've overcome, it helps give us the energy to keep moving forward and doing the hard things. So whether you're a leader of a team, a business owner, or a high achiever, you'll get something that you can take away and help you along your own growth journey today. Now, I've said this before, but if you truly want to grow, it means busting through the terror barrier and feeling the discomfort of it while you act anyway. And it's so good when we can break through those barriers. And today, our guest is going to give us some really good questions to think about no matter where you are on your growth journey. You'll be able to tell that she's had me thinking quite a bit about some evocative questions. Now, if you're a business owner and you're thinking of transitioning at some point, whether that means exiting the business by selling it or handing it off to the next generation of leaders, this is going to be an impactful conversation for you. And whether you want to retire in the near future or in the distant future, I believe that if you'll wrestle with the questions that Denise Logan poses today, you're going to be farther along and you're going to be ready for that transition. Now, let me just tell you a little bit more about Denise Logan before we get started. So Denise has a background as a lawyer, and she's also been a mental health professional and a business owner. Denise shares her experiences so that business owners and their advisors can navigate the transition out of their business with ease and, most importantly, without regrets. She's a frequent communicator on family business, business succession, navigating tough transitions, leaving a lasting legacy, restoring meaning to work, giving yourself permission to care and empathize, as well as business development and networking with a purpose. Now, she's written a book called The Seller's Journey, and years ago, Denise owned a successful law firm, and you'll hear her share about the time when it came for her to let her business go, and when the trucks finally pulled away with all of her stuff. That's a powerful conversation, so let's go ahead and get into that conversation with Denise Logan right now. Well, hey, Denise, I am so glad to have you on the podcast. Welcome to In the Growth Space.
I'm so excited. Thanks for having me, David.
Oh, gosh, it's my pleasure. I've been really looking forward to today's conversation after we met and had a chance to get to know each other. And, you know, you talk on a topic that I think is really important, especially in the season that we live in right now. There's so many people in my generation, the baby boomer generation, that have built businesses over the period of probably 40, maybe even 50 years. And now they're thinking about or beginning to transition out of that business and hand it off to the next generation. And I'd love just to kind of talk a little bit about that transition. But before we kind of go there, maybe let's tell the listeners, how did you get into this space in the first place?
Oh, that's such an interesting journey. I always think, in my early life, I was a mental health professional.
Mm-hmm.
And then I became a lawyer. And wouldn't you think that I would have been able to use that good mental health skill to keep myself from becoming a lawyer?
I was going to say that's quite a transition right there. I'm sure there's a story in that even.
And I built a firm in Washington, D.C. And when we reached a pretty good size, I realized I was burned out and it was time for me to leave.
Yeah.
I merged my firm, got rid of my house, and bought a motorhome.
Oh,
And I
wow.
took off. That's a whole other conversation that we could have over a
I'll
beverage.
bet,
Really,
yeah.
for me, I thought it would be 6 months, clear my head, and it turned into several years where I traveled all over North and Central America in a motorhome with two
Cool.
little dogs and a car I towed behind.
That's
Very
cool.
fun. But
Yeah.
I came off the road and I joined a friend's business who was preparing it for sale.
Hmm.
And over the next 10 years, we took that business to the market 3 times, and he was unable to let go.
Mm.
And I thought, isn't this interesting? You could be me and wait too long and be ready to give it away. Or you could be him and go too early and not be able to pull the trigger.
Mm.
And so I left and did a research study about why owners get stuck. What
Mm.
happens
Yeah.
that causes that friction? And then over the last 12 years, I've worked one-on-one with owners and their advisors to help them navigate that emotional obstacle, not the transactional part, because the
Mm-hmm.
transaction, as important as it is, this is the single largest transition
Yeah.
in a professional adult's life. And
Mm-hmm.
then I wrote a book about it, and I
Yeah.
speak and write about the psychology of owners and how to help them let go, but also about how work, money, and meaning comes together to create a greater legacy from our life than when
Mm-hmm.
we focus on only one part of that.
Wow. Wow. There's so much in in that. I think that what fascinates me, I think the most is just that psychology, the human psychology of the transition and the letting go. And where do you see most owners getting like what stuck? What's the maybe the first thing that they get stuck on?
Oh. So, the word retirement has a lot of baggage
Yeah.
around it. And I was working with a client recently who said, well, I'm not just going to sit around and do nothing all
Right.
day. I was like, oh, poor baby, who told you
Yeah.
that's what it would be like? But, for many of us, watching our parents or grandparents retire, for them, it was that. And for
Right.
us, playing golf and waiting for Wheel of Fortune to come on will not feel like a satisfying retirement. And so he and I were talking about what if we think about it as rewiring, not
Mm.
retiring?
Oh, I love that.
And who am I on the other side of this business? For many of our owners, their business has become their identity. There's no joke why we refer to it as our baby.
Right. Right. Yeah. No doubt.
And we have language for that in other parts of our life, right? When the last child leaves home, what do we call that?
Yeah. The empty nest.
Right? And
Yeah.
and because we know that in our personal lives and we have a framework for it, and often we're going through that experience of empty nesting with other people who are
Mm-hmm.
experiencing it at the same time. Your children's friends' parents are also going through it, or neighbors or other family members can experience it. For a business owner, the business is often the last child that leaves home.
Yeah. Wow. I never thought about that way. That's that's really interesting. And especially for those business owners who have founded the business, it really, like you said earlier, it does become their identity. It's who they are. So I guess how do you navigate some of those kinds of conversations? Because you clearly separated the transaction from the transition, and I think that that's an important distinction. So if we have business owners and founders who are listening, what's the best thing for them to think about, and how do you navigate that?
I might put it in the context of a story, because I think often we can hear ourselves in the tale of someone else. So, and I'll give you a couple of different examples. And I'll always say to listeners, don't get weirded out about the dollar amount of the transaction you're going to hear about or the
Yeah.
industry sector. Think about how this might apply to you. So, this first story is about it was an $85 million business. 8 weeks before the closing, the owner suddenly announced that he would not take a penny less than 9 times EBITDA. Never mind that he already had a deal at 6.2 times. And
Okay.
so the investment banker called me and said, I think my client's gone crazy. I'm like, yeah, it sounds like
Yeah,
it.
I think
Let's see
so.
if we can figure out what scared him.
Mm.
So his original plan was to sell the business, buy a sailboat, and sail around the globe. You can get a pretty good boat for $85 million. So
No
it
kidding.
probably was not about the money, is what
Right.
I can say. And what I learned when I got involved there was 2 weeks before he asked for this unicorn of more money, his wife had said, I'm not doing that. I do not want to be stuck on a boat with you far away from my grandchildren. That is not happening.
Oh,
And
yeah.
can we agree, David, he is not coming back to tell the deal team the deal is off because my wife won't let me do what I want to do.
He won't, yeah, she won't sail with me.
And so he asked
Yeah.
for more money, which they couldn't produce. And so that was his attempt to try to pull out of something because he didn't know how to navigate this experience that was
Mm-hmm.
happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I did was some one on one work with husband and wife separately and came back to a solution together where
Mm-hmm.
he would buy the sailboat and sail. And every 6 weeks, she would take one grandchild, fly to where he was. They'd do 2 weeks on land building memories with the child. She would fly home and he would sail on.
Oh,
Boom.
nice.
The
Nice.
deal was back on track, closed on time at its original asking price because it was not about the money.
Mm.
What they were experiencing as a couple is what we would call relational grief.
Mm.
So if you think about it, we start a business or we each have our life, right? Maybe, and this can apply in multi-dimensional couples. So we're going to
Sure.
say husband and wife, but no one lose their mind about that
Yeah. Right.
framing.
Sure. Sure.
So the husband is running the business, the wife is running the home, and all of a sudden they've had a vision of what the future would be like. And as they get close to the end of that particular business, they realize our vision is not the same.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
What you want is not what I want. And if the only solution is that I have to travel with you, or maybe the spouse doesn't want to travel and I'm stuck at home with you. COVID
Yeah.
gave us a great look into that.
Sure.
Many of us were stuck at home and like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, if this is what retirement looks like, I don't want
I
it.
don't want any part. Yeah. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so those are some experiences. And for this particular couple, just to
Mm.
use them as an example, um, it would be very easy for one or both of them to pull the business in between them again, instead
Mm-hmm.
of dealing with the fact that what we want is not the same.
Yeah.
So that's one example.
Yeah, and it sounds like in that story, you also have to become as the transition expert, and you have to be almost like a marriage counselor in some ways, right? Yeah, you have to at least be able to pull out or discover what's peel back the onion, what's down below the surface.
And some of that I think is I work a lot with advisors to help
Yeah,
them develop those skills because
sure.
here's what often happens either the financial advisor or the investment banker or the lawyer will say, so, what's your plan when you sell the
Mm,
business? What are you going to do? And we hear golf and travel.
yeah,
Friends, that is not a plan.
that's right. That's right. Oh my gosh.
And
Yeah.
often the advisor hasn't done this work for themselves to
Mhm.
know what is their future look like, what are all of these emotional issues for them, and so
Mm.
instead they hear, oh good, you have a solution, check that off the box, let me hop on to the transaction. And they
Yeah.
forget this is a giant transition. for a
Yeah.
business owner. And so there are some other skills that we can use as advisors or even as owners to prepare ourselves in
Hmm.
advance. And sometimes I'll hear an owner say, well, I'm not going to retire. I'll just die at my desk. Okay. That's not a plan, number
Right.
one.
Right.
And number two, all of the research shows that owners typically end up leaving their business 5 years earlier than they plan.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
we have this idea in our mind that we will be in control, that we will get to know the day we leave, that somehow
Yeah.
it will become magically clear for us. But
Mm.
a lot of the reasons why people end up leaving earlier than they thought are things like their own health
Hmm.
or the health of a family member
Sure.
or a major change in the market
Yeah. Well,
or right, all of those things that are outside of our control. So when we
yeah.
predict, oh, I'm going to work until X period of time and I'll be perfectly healthy and my business will be healthy and I'll get to make that choice, that's not actually what happens for most owners.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I guess to me, what it sounds like, excuse me, is that there are a lot of business owners that really need to do two things. Number one, they need to have a vision for what that next season of life is going to look like for them, have some honest discussions with their spouse, their significant other. Um, and then they also need to have a dose of realism too, I guess, and understand that things don't always go to plan.
Well, do any of us know someone who died before the life expectancy chart revealed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are not immune from that. And so I'll often, when I tell that sailboat story, someone inevitably says, well, like, why didn't the spouse say she didn't want to do that? Okay, David, have you been married a long time?
I've been married for 33 years, so yep.
Okay. And you're probably still married because you and your spouse don't start an argument about everything that comes up,
Yeah.
right?
There are
Your
hills to
spouse,
die on, and then there are hills
right.
to not die on.
And your spouse is probably thinking, yeah, that might never even happen.
Right,
So
right. Yeah,
I don't need to have that argument right
right.
now. But
Exactly.
as they got very close to the exit,
Mm.
suddenly she realized, oh no, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's speak now or
Hmm.
not. And so
Yeah.
that's an example as well when we talk about getting on the same page as your
Hmm.
spouse, like knowing what that really is, because we all develop coping mechanisms in our relationships where we're like, yeah,
Sure.
yeah, sure, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
And then push comes to shove, and we're like, no, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
But here's another example. So I often say to owners, what does work provide for you
Mm.
other than money and financial security?
Mm.
So let me say that again. What does work provide for you other than money and financial security?
Great
And we
question.
should be able to get 12 to 15 distinct answers to that question.
Wow.
Some of your listeners are like, well, what else is there?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure that, yeah, that coaching question is getting them, thinking right now. So that's good. I love it.
And the reason is because these needs that are getting met by work do not go away just because you get a big sack of cash. So
Right.
if you and I had just played a little bit about that to prompt listeners to think, what are some of the things that you get from work other
Yeah.
than just money and financial security, David? What do you get?
Yeah. So, fulfillment. I mean, one is fulfillment. I mean, second would be a sense of purpose.
Mhm.
Um, um, Great question. So what else? Fulfillment, sense of purpose, a sense of helping others as well.
Right. And we can even come down to some really basic ones that
Yeah.
are starting points like structure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Work provides structure to our day and to our week. It's a
Mm.
place to go, right?
Yeah.
During COVID, weren't you thinking, when am I going to get out of this house?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so was your spouse.
Sure. 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 Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
when are you going to get out of that?
He was thinking, when is David getting get out of the time?
Right. So
Right.
it's a place to
Yeah.
go, it's
Yeah.
structure, it's intellectual stimulation.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
friendship. For
Right.
many of our owners, their employees and customers and vendors are their friends.
Mm,
But
yeah.
then we start to get to some of the deeper ones, like the thrill of the hunt,
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah.
right? You're chasing that deal or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the thing is that's related to your industry. But
Mm-hmm.
even deeper, things like power.
Yeah.
At work, you say you want something done, and it pretty much gets done.
Right.
At home, that might not be the case.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so when we start to really drop into what are all of the various things that work
Mm,
is meeting, those are real needs. And
yeah.
how will those needs get met outside of work?
Boy, that that's a fascinating. I mean, that's a fascinating subject right there because I think that I mean, even as you pose the question to me, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know that I've ever thought about that before. I really haven't. And I thought, I mean, I've thought that I've thought about it, but when you really sit down and contemplate the question, I wouldn't have ever thought about, I guess, the structure and having a structure and the chase of the deal, and the support of the employees. All of those things are really really good to think about. Hmm.
And it's worth writing them down, right? There's what we do when
Yeah,
we think about them in our head, and there's
yeah,
something else about writing the list of 15 things
yeah,
and then starting to line them up with, let's just say, friendship is one that we're going to use.
yeah,
Who are my Saturday friends?
hmm, yeah,
Because we have our work friends, and
right.
then who are our Saturday friends? And if the answer is, I don't have any Saturday friends, we don't wait until someone retires and then try to build a friendship network for them.
Yeah, right.
It's not too late, but it's a lot harder. So what if we begin earlier, saying 3 to 5 years before the exit? We would never just bring a business to the market without preparing all of those things that the business needs to be successful for their transition. We prepare an owner to also be successful for this transition. Because otherwise, what happens is we dump them out and they will say, it feels like a black hole.
Mm, yeah,
It doesn't have to be a black hole, but I think strong advisors help their clients not just to harvest the wealth from
mm,
their business, but to also prepare for what life will be like. For
mm-hmm,
many of our owners, they have been so focused on their business that friendship may have fallen by the wayside.
sure.
Or where will I get my sense of power? Because I can
Mm-hmm.
tell you, coming home and deciding that you're going to tell your spouse the way they're organizing the pantry is not efficient is going to go badly.
It's very poorly, very, very poorly. Absolutely.
And often the
It's good.
spouse can also be feeling that sense of anxiety. I know
Mm-hmm.
years ago, when my college roommate's husband retired, um, the first couple of days, cool, fun.
Yeah.
And then he's in the kitchen and he says, so, what are we going to have for lunch today? And she kind of put her hands on her hips and was like, well, let me just tell you how this is going to go down. Because I'm going to have half an apple and a yogurt like I've had for years.
Years.
And
Yeah.
you're going to have lunch somewhere not in the kitchen today.
It's great. I love that.
But that can
Uh,
build anxiety for a spouse as
sure.
well as they
Yeah.
start to approach that time. And by the way, lots of people do this successfully, but I
Right.
think it becomes successful when there's more planning and more thoughtfulness about
Yeah.
it.
Well,
So,
and yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
oh,
Just a thought that came to me. So I work with a lot of emerging leaders as well, and I think that there's a lesson in this for the emerging leaders and the millennial business owners as well, not just the baby boomers in my generation, because in a lot of ways this is a lesson for them to be thinking about and preparing. And as you were talking about Saturday friends, I thought to myself, Well, why not begin to start building those right now and putting, boundaries around your work time and creating the space to be able to have those friendships and build those friendships now. And even be thinking about, what does work provide for me? What is it that other than money and financial security? So I think that there's a really powerful lesson here for a wide range of leaders and really people in general that are in their working years.
Right. We begin with the end in mind. Isn't that Stephen Covey's
Stephen
principle?
Covey, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
We would not begin a business without thinking, wait, what is the purpose of this business?
Yeah.
What do I want eventually from the business? The same is true for the
Mm-hmm.
leader. And an example of this, and this can happen with young owners or older owners, right? We often think that transition and exit only happens for baby boomers, and
Yeah,
that's not true.
that's
I
true.
was working with the founder of a software company, 36 years old.
Mm.
He was set to net $16 million on the other side of his sale. That's a pretty good chunk of change for a
Yeah.
man at his place in life. And he reached this point where he was like, who am I going to hang out with? All my buddies have jobs. And so he was out shooting pool with his best friend, and he made that comment. And his friend said, boo hoo, dude. I wish I had your sad little $16 million problem.
Right.
But David, the problem didn't go away. It just went
Mm.
underground because now he also felt shame
Oh, wow.
about this feeling that he had.
Sure.
And I think oftentimes we only talk to business owners about the economics.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
the transactional professionals will be talking about the deal and the money. And it would be so easy for an owner to make this comment and get rebuffed by one of
Mm-hmm.
the transactional professionals who are like, dude,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to
Mm-hmm.
get plenty of money. You'll figure it out. But that's not a fair experience to have with someone who is going through a transition. Let's bring this back to our children again, because I think it's a good way. Your listeners, many of them are parents. You
Right.
don't wait until your child turns 18 and then on that morning say, so what are you going to do with yourself?
Yeah.
You
Right.
prepare them. You're talking
Exactly.
about it. You know these moments of
Mm.
transition that they are experiencing
Yeah.
when they're leaving middle school
Mm-hmm.
and going to high school, and they feel sad about leaving behind their favorite coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't just say, well, get over it. Like, how dumb is that? And yet,
Right.
for our owners, and this was true for me when I exited my business, as much as I was thrilled to have made that transition, there
Mm.
were also plenty of days for quite a longer time than I would have expected, where I'd be on the patio drinking tea and reading a book, and all of a sudden, something about my business would pop into my head. And I'd think, oh, oh, that's right. There isn't someone for me to tell that
I
to.
can't tell that. Yeah,
The
sure.
people around me, I think, also struggled a little bit with, wait, you're sad? You got what you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, I got what I wanted, but oh no, I got what I wanted.
Yeah.
Both things were true. And even
Yeah.
an example for me on the very last day, um, the acquirer had shown up and they had all their trucks loaded with the furniture. And back then there were real file cabinets
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Real file cabinets. Yeah.
file cabinets and furniture, and all of the equipment had gone. And the last truck was about to pull away from the building, and I wanted to see it.
Yeah.
Right. So I leaned toward the window to catch a glimpse of that truck, and I hit my head on the window. And all of a sudden, I was crying, and I thought, I didn't hit my head that hard. And then I realized, oh, I'm not crying about having hit my head.
Mm.
This is a lifetime of my work,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
turning the corner without me.
Right. Right.
And so I was standing in the empty office space
Yeah.
where all of my effort and life had been. And I was
Mm-hmm.
thrilled that I had made a transition, but I had also made a transition, and I was not yet fully across the river to the
Right.
other side.
It's almost like it's one of those and kind of a situations. Yes. And you made the transition, or you made the transaction, but the transition was still kind of ahead of you too. Oh, that's really fascinating. And it actually gets me thinking too about this word that a lot of people talk about, especially in this phase of our lives, is legacy. And we start to think about that, I guess, a little bit. And there probably are not a lot of business owners that maybe fully wrap their head around that. What do you see as something that people should think about when they think about creating their legacy, or how their legacy will play out in this transition?
Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so excited to talk about this.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there are a couple of things, right? Who am I if I am no longer the owner of this business?
Mm-hmm.
Is a really important question. And everywhere we go, one of the first questions we are asked is, what do you do?
Yeah, right.
Whether that is relevant or not. I was at the
Mm-hmm.
hairdresser a while ago, and the woman 6 feet away in her chair getting her hair blow dried says, "So what do you do?" And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Why is that even relevant
Yeah.
right now? So I have a way that I answer that question, and I'm a little funny about it. But when someone asks me, what do you do? I say, about what?
That's
And
good.
inevitably the person's like, it shifts the energy a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they'll say, well, like, what do you do for work? Wait, you want to know how I earn my money?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they will often say, well, I just want to I want to know how to relate to you. So we do not
Mm-hmm.
only relate to each other based on the economics of our
That's us.
life. And I no longer ask that question, what do you do? And there's a reason for it. I actually believe that question is an economic pegging question.
Interesting.
Am I above you or am I below you? Based on your answer, should I be kissing up to you right now, or should you be kissing up to me?
Oh, wow. I have never thought about it that way. That is really, really fascinating.
And what other question could you ask when meeting someone new that would allow you an opportunity to relate to them?
Huh. I would think, what are some of your interests, or what are you passionate about?
What's your favorite book?
Yeah.
Right? What is the best meal you've ever had? There are a million
Yeah.
questions
Yeah.
other than what do you do? And so, what I often
So
suggest
good.
when I'm talking to an owner, and I just practice this myself because I think it's fascinating to see
Yeah.
our own discomfort. What if you began to answer that question, what do you do, when someone asks you, and you answer it with something other than how you make your money?
Yeah. That's good.
Practice it. What does that provide for you? What are you answering? Maybe
Mm.
I did this with a venture capitalist years ago. So fun. He was preparing to exit his business, and we were working on this, because there's a certain amount of cachet if you answer, I'm a VC investor,
Yeah.
right? People
Right.
respond to you differently than if you say you're the landscaper.
Right.
Is that right? Is that fair? Yes or no? But that is some of what happens. And so he started learning to play guitar because when their last daughter left, they discovered a guitar in the closet that he had bought her because she desperately wanted to learn guitar, but obviously never used, right?
Never did. Yeah.
And so he started taking guitar lessons. And I suggested to him that that was the answer that he could say, I'm a guitar player. Now, the curious thing that would happen, he'd be on a plane and he would answer with that. And now the person beside him wants to know, like, are you famous?
Yeah. Are
Right?
you
Are
part of
you
a band?
right?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
band are you? But there's a
Yeah.
whole other conversation that happens,
Mm-hmm.
and getting our self esteem met from our title
Yeah.
and our
Yeah.
work. It's a really great exercise to
That
begin
is
long
so
before
good.
you're exiting, because
Yeah.
it shifts the narrative around it.
Absolutely. Denise, that is so good. That is so powerful. I am just still like, that is such a good question, and a good thing for all of our leaders who are watching or listening to the podcast right now to really seriously contemplate, because um, we are not our work. We take we one of the exercises I do with my emerging leaders in particular is I have them create their I am statements, meaning whatever comes after the words I am is defining. And so I'm actually thinking through that, so that in this context, so that we begin to think through what our work does provide for us, but not necessarily how it defines us. So boy,
And
this
not
is really
just
interesting.
around your exit, right? There are just so
Right.
many deeper ways. Um, one of the things I did and this is a little sidetrack, but
Yeah, love
if you
it.
don't want to talk about this, you can always cut it off, but
No,
it's
no, I love it.
fun for
I love
me.
it.
One of the
Yeah.
things I did when I was on my motorhome trip, campgrounds are not generally in the most urban setting.
Right. Right.
So I was in my motorhome, and one morning I went for a run with my dogs. And on the left side of the road was a dairy farm, and the right side of the road was a chicken farm. And I'm running along with the dogs, and I think, I don't really know anything about farming. So I tied my dogs up to the post, and I went and found the farmer on the dairy farm, because I'm a little afraid of chickens. They're
Yeah, would be
just a
too.
little,
Yeah.
I don't know what I think about chickens. Cows
Yeah.
seem more approachable to me.
I love it. Yeah.
And I said to the farmer, look, I don't know anything about farming, but I'd like to. If
Hmm.
I promise to come every day for a week and do whatever you need done, and you don't have to pay me, are you game? And he kind of stroked his chin and looked me up and down. For your listeners who aren't seeing us, and maybe even on Zoom, you might not know, but I'm 5'2", so I don't really look like I'm a burly
Yeah,
chick.
ready to,
He
yeah,
stroked his chin
take
and
on a
he's like,
cow.
yep, wear boots. And so I showed up on the farm every
Love
day
it.
for a week. The first day, he had me bottle feed newborn calves. Oh, of course, I was coming back the next day.
Of
Come
course.
on.
Yeah, of course.
Day 2, I worked the milking machine. Day 3, I did bookkeeping. Day 4, I drove a big tractor full of manure, which I thought, being a lawyer, had fully prepared me for that skill set.
Oh, that's good.
And by the end of the week, I could not believe that I could go to the grocery store and buy milk for
Mm,
$1.49 or whatever it was at that time. It's not that I didn't know where milk came from, but I had seen only a very narrow slice of what is involved in making milk happen. And it started to change the way I thought about work in the world and
mm,
the meaningfulness of
mm-hmm,
work.
mm-hmm.
Because I grew up in a very blue collar family. I had a job as a lawyer where I was paid for using my brain, and paid disproportionately compared to the farmer who was producing
Sure.
the milk. And I started to be able to look around me and say, someone made this desk, and
Mm,
someone harvested the wood for this
mm-hmm.
desk, and someone trucked it. And it started to help me look at all of the reasons why being identified with our work is foolish,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
all work matters, and
Yeah.
not what we've been trained to think, which is some work matters more than other work.
Elevated. Yeah.
And now here's a brain twister I'm going to toss in.
I love it.
And by the way, 1 week out of every month for the next several years, I did that same thing, where I would show up at pancake supper, or at the firehouse, or a chamber of commerce meeting. And whoever had the most interesting job, I'd be, David, can I come to work with you for a
That's
week?
cool. That's cool.
I rode a lobster boat in Nova Scotia. I worked in a paint
Oh
factory. There
my
were
gosh.
tons of things. But here's my brain twister for you. If who I am is what I do, and I no longer do I not exist?
Wow.
Because
Oh.
at some point,
Mm.
we will not do what we used to do.
Mm-hmm.
That may be, we will all leave our work voluntarily or involuntarily. And if we have not done the work of individuating from our job and our title, we are left bereft.
Mm. Wow. That is really powerful. That is a powerful question, Denise. I wow. I'm at a loss for words, but what a thing to think into. Oh my
It
gosh.
comes back to the question, I know this was kind of a winding answer to your question
No,
about
it's great.
legacy, but legacy is more than just a sack of cash or a name on a building.
Mm-hmm.
And what we are
Yes.
leaving behind us are those subtle experiences that we've
Mm.
had. I mean, for me, there's an experience that happened in my life that is a moment of someone else's legacy that I'm not even sure that person knew.
Mm.
The house I grew up in, neither of my parents had graduated from high school. So college was not on the radar screen. That was not something someone was talking to me about. I
Mm.
had my eye on that prize,
Sure.
but my parents did not. So when the time came for me to go to college, they were like, "You want to go to college?" And I often thought, did we not have dinner together? Did you
Yeah.
think I was going to work at Kroger?
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah.
Because that really wasn't my plan. And so there wasn't money for me to go to college. And
Mm.
I do not believe the parents owe that to their children, but I had worked, several jobs and saved money and got a scholarship, but I was $2,500 short.
Mm.
And so I went to the local bank and tried to get a student loan. And I was 16. So I had a little early trajectory that was going
Okay.
on. I
Sure.
bring the student loan papers home, and my dad says, "Why would I sign that? What if you don't pay it back?" Again, I was a little bit like, have we
Yeah.
not met
Yeah.
before?
You don't know me, do
What's
you?
that
Yeah.
about? Right, it's a separate conversation. But
Yeah.
I went back to the bank, and only probably because I was 16 and didn't know any better. And that banker made an unsecured $2,500 student loan. That says how long ago it is that
Yeah.
$2,500 could get me,
Yeah.
over the hump. But
Right.
he made an unsecured $2,500 student loan to a 16-year-old girl.
Mm.
That changed my life because otherwise I would not have been able to go. I'm sure there would have been, maybe I would have worked another year or whatever, but it took me years before I realized how big that was.
Mm-hmm.
And that clearly was not bank policy.
Sure.
He
Yeah.
stepped out for some reason to do something for me. And when I went back to ask him why he did that, like what he saw that made him willing to do that, he had already passed away.
Oh, wow. Oh.
There are moments in
Mm.
every one of our lives where we are doing something that impacts another person's life, positively or negatively. We are always making our legacy.
Mm.
And what would it mean if instead of thinking about our business or our money as our legacy, we dropped in deeper
Mm.
into a bigger view
Mm.
of legacy? And sometimes, my mental health training was in two tracks: work and financial disorders. So people who are addicted to work and money.
Okay. Yeah.
And the other is thanatology, which is the study of death and dying.
Oh, wow.
At
Interesting.
the time, I probably couldn't have explained why I chose those two tracks. But from this place in my life at 58, it is clear to me, because when we are afraid of addressing our mortality, we
Mm.
often turn to money and work as certainty. If
Mm.
only I have enough money,
Mm.
then
Okay.
I can stay away from this uncertainty. And so I believe that as we talk about legacy, it is something much greater than just the economics of it.
Gosh, this is so powerful, Denise. I loved, thank you for sharing that, because I love the story of the banker giving you that unsecured loan, because I think it really demonstrates something that I will often talk to, especially emerging leaders about. And that is that we talk a lot about, the inner critic and imposter syndrome. And so often there are leaders in organizations that will believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself. And I think that borrowing that belief of someone else is and can be super powerful. And to me, that your story demonstrated that for you, that banker believed in you and believed in your future, probably saw something in you that maybe you didn't see at 16 that really changed your life. And I think that can make all the difference. And I really appreciate this conversation around taking it deeper than just power and money. When we talk about legacy, let's take a look at it from a bigger perspective. And who are we impacting, not what are we doing, as you said. This is amazing. Oh.
It is so much. Can I tell another silly story?
Absolutely. I'd love to. I'd love to hear it.
Those moments that we don't know that we are impacting someone's life. And can we be more conscious? So I'm a professional speaker. I speak at about 70 conferences a year on these topics. So I'm on stage at this pretty big event, and I love it when the audience is engaged and like they're making eye contact. But there was a woman in this one audience who was making what I will call uncomfortable eye contact.
Like lasers, huh?
Exactly. And, it was starting to unnerve me a little bit on stage. And everywhere I looked, she was like definitely laser beam on me. So at the book signing afterwards and at the cocktail party, out of my peripheral vision, everywhere I saw this woman, she was like there. And I was kind of a little creeped out. And then she makes a beeline, and I'm like, oh, she's coming right toward me. And she gets, also uncomfortably close, and then says, "You don't remember me, do you?" Oh, your audience right now is like getting their own creeps.
Yeah, like, oh my goodness, wait a second.
I'm sorry, I don't. I'm sure we do know each other, and I'm sorry I've forgotten. Can you remind me of where we know each other? And she said, I was a paralegal at a law firm that you spoke at. And you caught me in the file room afterwards and told me that you saw that I should do more. And I used that as my inspiration the entire time I was going through law school. It kept me motivated because I knew you saw that. And then she told me she was now a lawyer and she was doing her thing. And I thought, thank God that wasn't the day where I was like, you are dumb as a rock.
Right.
Why are you even here? You can't file. Or what are those passing careless things that we do that we don't always realize are having an impact? And so fortunately, this was one of those times where
shining moments.
Because gosh, considering she was like, you don't remember me, do you? That could have gone sideways.
Yeah. Wow.
But
amazing.
One of the things that I do is called the legacy dinner. And it is a facilitated dinner conversation for leaders and for advisors to help them drop more deeply into what legacy is beyond those things that we stay so shallow with. And it's such a transformative experience that really brings a small group together in a way that changes the way they think about legacy. And so often what I find is that we have these conversations like you and I are having now, and then we go off into our lives and we forget. And so having a group, whether it's a peer group or others who you've had an experience like that dinner with, help you to touch back to, oh, I'm not a weirdo thinking about this by myself. It matters. It really matters what we think about, how work, money, and meaning weaves together into a greater legacy instead of just one narrow slice.
Denise, this is so powerful, and I am so glad that we got connected and we're
Me
having
too.
this conversation today. Because I think it's powerful, and it's really really important. Before we wrap up here today, I want to make sure that people know how to get a hold of you. What's the best way for people who are listening and going, "Wow, I need a speaker for my event," or I want to talk about transitioning out of my business. How do they get a hold of you? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks so much, David. My website is deniselogan.com. Nice and easy,
Yep.
nothing too challenging.
Love it.
And I speak and write on this topic. And I have a long running blog column that's on my website that has some topics that might be interesting, like, is dying at your desk noble or tragic? You might guess how I
That's
come down on
Yeah,
that
I think so.
question, but really being able to help leaders and their advisors think differently about how to prepare for and go through this transition. And I think it applies for all of us in any
Does.
part of our work.
Yeah, it really does. And I think that one of the important things that I want our listeners to catch is that it's not just for our leaders, but it's for all of our advisors. And I know that you work with advisors as well. And I think that that's really important because I think the advisors in the world of transition and transaction need to be aware of all of this aspect of what they're doing, and be more aware of the depth and the psychology of the human aspect of what they're doing. And so I would encourage them, if you're listening and you fall into that category, I want you to get in touch with Denise and check out her website. The legacy dinner is an amazing concept. She and I had a conversation before about that, and I think it's just an amazing concept. So definitely reach out to Denise. Denise, is there anything that you want to just finish up with? Maybe wrap a bow on our conversation. If there's something that you'd like to share, just to kind of wrap us up, I'd love for you to do that.
Yeah, when choosing an advisor, let's think about this. Transactional prowess is the bare minimum. That is not a distinguishing characteristic between whether you should hire this advisor or that advisor. You should expect that your advisor will be transactionally proficient. But the question that I would ask any advisor that you are about to work with is, what is your plan to exit? What is your legacy? How have you taken the steps to prepare to leave your business? Because honestly, if you are having someone who is helping you with your leadership or with your transition, why would you choose someone who hasn't already been thoughtful about this? Because that will be the difference between whether or not they can accompany you on this journey in a way that is skillful, or whether this is someone who is strictly focused on the transaction. And you deserve that, because landing on the other side, I refer to clients as what's nexters.
That's great. I love it.
Landing on the other side of this transition fully intact instead of brutalized and battered. And you want to land safely on the other side, fully engaged in the next chapter of your life. You deserve that.
Yeah, I agree, Denise. Wow, this is so good. Thank you so much for sharing time with me and our listeners who will listen to this, and really do appreciate it. And I think that you're doing amazing work, and I'm really grateful to get a chance to know you. And so thank you.
Thank you for hosting me. It's so lovely to be with you.
My pleasure.